I've been producing music for over 16 years, 10 of those have been professionally, and in that time I've learned so many things that I wish I knew earlier. And in this video, I'm gonna be showing you 5 vocal production tips that I wish I knew when I first got started. I use these techniques all of the time, and you should know them too. But even more important than knowing what they are and how to do them is knowing when to use them. Because if you overuse good techniques like this, it can actually harm your song more than help. Let's get into it. So this very first technique is how I can take a moment like this, which I'm gonna play for you in just a second, and fill up this space right here where there is no vocal. So let me show you the context here a little bit.
Hold your breath, don't make a sound. Dip, tiptoe if you wanna get out.
Okay, so when I say this line, if you wanna get out, and then right after that line ends, there is nothing happening in the vocal and it goes pure instrumental. This is a wonderful opportunity to get this vocal to continue to fill up this space. You can actually do this 2 separate ways, but I'm gonna show you my favorite, which is using what's called a delay throw. So I'm gonna make it so that if you wanna get out goes, if you wanna get out, if you wanna get out, if you wanna get out. So what I'm gonna do here is duplicate this track. We're gonna grab just this line here. We're gonna copy it over. We'll rename this delay throw. So then what we're gonna do is put a delay at the very end of the chain here. My favorite is Comeback Kid. Now the first thing we need to do is set dry out to 0. This is gonna make sure that the actual audio of me singing does not happen the same time that I'm singing. We don't want any of the dry signal, only the wet signal. And then we need to figure out what the actual rhythm of this is supposed to be. So let's just go ahead and see what a quarter note sounds like, and I can just tell you it's not gonna work, but we'll take a listen.
If you wanna get out.
So that's much too fast. It happens way, way too quick. So we're gonna set this to a whole note. That's pretty frequently what these end up being. Let's try this out.
If you wanna get out, if you wanna get out, if you wanna get out.
Now, this is exactly what we want in terms of the timing. However, the actual effect is not very convincing right now. So I'm gonna show you what I do to make it a more convincing effect. The first thing I like to do is add a little bit of tape. This is gonna add a little bit of character to it. Roll off some of the highs here. Depending on if it's a male or female vocal, in my case, I'm probably gonna go to 2500 and just listen to this.
If you wanna get out, if you wanna get out, if you wanna get out.
So now we're getting a little bit more of that underwater type feeling. The other issue is that right now it's just way too loud. So we're gonna push the volume on the fader quite a bit down. And then the last thing that I like to do is add reverb at the very end. We'll just grab Valhalla, set mix to somewhere between 10 and 30%. It's just gonna really depend on how this actually sounds. Let's give this a shot.
If you wanna get out, if you wanna get out.
Nice. The last thing I might do here is just bring the feedback down a little bit so it doesn't ring out quite as long, and we're in business. Of course, if you want to process this any further using distortion or a chorus effect or making it wider or all sorts of different things, you can go for it and do it that way. That is number 1, my friends. That brings us to technique number 2 that I wish I would have known when I got started, which is actually automating my reverbs using automation buses. In my track here, you can see all of these at the very top. There's nothing in here, and that is because these are effects buses. This is where I send my tracks to get processed with reverbs and delays. And one really good way that we can make things sound more interesting is by actually automating these reverbs. So for example, we have this transition from the chorus into the bridge.
Things are upside down.
Now you can see here I'm also automating the actual volume of this vocal so it kind of gets tucked into the instrumental as this bridge happens. However, if we really want to sell this effect better to make it so that this vocal actually gets kind of sprayed into the instrumental, we can automate the reverb. So the main reverb that I'm using here is this one right here. It's called verse, long, verb, voc. So what I can do is put a point where this starts and a point at where I want it to essentially peak out. So then we'll bring it up like this, and then we'll give this a listen, see how this sounds. I actually might want that effect to start a little sooner. So if we just listen to this soloed out. Now, if we want to go even bigger, I actually have another reverb right here called Big Spacey Reverb, and we could also throw a little bit of this in as well. We'll just go like so. We'll make it so it starts even a little bit sooner. Let's see how that sounds. So since we're adding the reverb, I'm not going to automate this quite as much, just that way the reverb is handling it. Nice. In the context of the whole track. the other places that I will use automation are in examples like this, where we're going from this instrumental into a very soft part of the song, where if I were to have too much reverb, let me push this up a little bit.
My heart is beating in this nightmare.
That sounds very, very verby. Now, if we listen to how that reverb sounds in the context of the chorus or a verse,
my heart is beating in this nightmare.
that sounds really good. But when it's so exposed, like in this moment,
my heart is beating.
It's just way too much. And so we're gonna dry this vocal up. It's not gonna sound quite as heavy-handed, and it's gonna more or less make the vocal come forward as well.
My heart is beating in this nightmare.
That sounds so much better. It doesn't sound like it's getting drowned out in reverb, and then we bring it back up for the final chorus.
Am I just dreaming?
Boom. If you're not automating your reverbs, you're missing out on so many opportunities to make your track feel more interesting. I know many of you watching are trying to produce your own music and build your own fan base and get your music out there into the world so you can have your own artist career, a lot like what I'm doing. But you're struggling to make your song sound professional. Well, we are in that time of year where it's the end of the year, it's holiday season. So if you want hands-on help with your music, that is exactly what we do inside of our mentorship program, Develop. So if you're looking for that hands-on help with your own music, you can book a call with my team with the link in the description down below. We are doing some special offers to end out the year that will be going away in the new year. See you there. That brings us to technique number 2. I actually use all these techniques that we're going to talk about in this one song. And that is making your vocals feel more wide by using doubles and lots of vocal layers. Now, it's very, very important that you understand when to do this and when not to do this. So you should always know what to do, but you should also know when not to do those things, because you can be very, very heavy-handed with it. So for example, if we go to the very beginning of the song,
monsters hiding in the darkness.
We only have a single vocal here. If I were to have added a bunch of layers at the very, very beginning, that would actually change how the song feels from a tone perspective, and it would also change how we perceive the remainder of the song. So if we look at the vocals, these are all of my vocal layers right here. You can see vocals happening here, but it's not happening here or happening here. Empty, 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 right? But then we've got all of these layers happening a little bit more frequently, happen again here, sometimes here, not here, here, but not here. And so what I'm doing is I'm intentionally thinking about where does this make sense to allow these vocals to open up. But one of the greatest ways that you can make your vocals feel bigger in the context of a big sounding track is to do vocal layers. And by the way, what I have here is actually pretty mild in comparison to some of the tracks I've done previously. But let's just listen to what this chorus sounds like if I have no layers at all. This is the very first chorus.
My heart is beating in this nightmare.
Now, this sounds okay. I'm not going to sit here and say this sounds bad. However, in this moment, it makes sense for the vocals to now feel bigger, feel wider. And so all I'm doing here is I'm creating doubles of that melody. And what we're doing is re-recording this 2 separate times, panning one all the way to the left, panning the other all the way to the right, and then bringing the volume down a fair bit so that it's not sounding completely in your face. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. In this case, I want it to be more of a, wow, the vocal just feels wider all of a sudden. Let's take a listen.
My heart is beating in this nightmare.
Now, whenever you do this, you absolutely need to re-record the vocal. You cannot just copy this lead vocal and then say, I'll pan one to the left and pan one to the right. You're gonna have all sorts of issues. It does not work. More on that a little bit later, because I'll actually show you a little trick on how to make that work sometimes. The other thing with this is that you want to make sure that you perform these identical to the lead. If you hold on to one note a little bit longer than the lead vocal, or you cut off a note too short, those things are going to be noticeable. So whenever I'm doing vocal layers, I'm paying very, very close attention to how long am I holding notes, where are the consonants is gonna go, things like P's and S's and T's and things like that. If I have a word like monsters and then end with an S sound, a lot of times I will do one of two things. Either one, I will make sure I get that S sound to happen at the exact moment the lead vocal does, or I'll drop the ending consonants entirely and allow the lead vocal to hold it. So instead of saying monsters, I would just say monster, and then let the lead vocal handle the closing of that word with the S. It's gonna help kind of clean things up a little bit. And then once we get into moments like this, you can see we have a lot more layers. And what we're doing is actually high octave here.
What'll happen if I fail?
Isolated doesn't sound great, but when you put it in the context, it actually really works. We have a harmony.
What'll What'll happen if I fail?
And then we have doubles,
What'll happen if I fail?
and then we have the lead.
What'll happen if I fail?
In the context,
What'll happen if I fail? All around me, it surrounds me. All the darkness, it'll find me.
so on find me, that right there. If I were to say find me and cut off on find and then go to the me, find me, that would sound really bad. You need to make sure find me. It needs to be the exact same contour. Everything needs to be as similar as you possibly can. Let's just take a listen to what this would sound like if we did not have this at all.
What'll happen if I fail? All around me, it surrounds me. All the darkness, it'll find me. I can hear the chime, shivers down my spine.
Boom, vocal layers. All right, that brings us to tip number 4, which is actually a way that you can do these doubles without re-recording the doubles, but also getting some other just absolutely wild, bonkers effects, and that is using Formant shifting. Now, most DAWs are going to have a stock Formant shifting plugin. For example, in Logic, you can use a plugin like Vocal Transformer right here, and you can see there is this Formant knob, and there's also a pitch knob. However, it doesn't sound very good. My go-to for something like this is using Little Altar Boy by Soundtoys. It's just absolutely a classic. It's one of my favorite plugins of all time. But what I'm going to show you is how I get this very last line right here.
Chime, shivers down my spine. Tick tock, we're almost out of time.
So when I say we're almost out of time, and then I cut off there, by the way, great opportunity to put another vocal throw. We'll just drop that in here.
Talk, we're almost out of time.
But I'm going to show you how I get this effect right here.
We're almost out of time.
First of all, you need to make sure that you do what I call motivated effects. In other words, whenever you do an effect like this, there needs to be a reason for it. There needs to be a motivation or an intention behind it. In filmmaking, for example, this would be motivated lighting. In other words, I have these lights behind me here, but if I wanted to have another little bit of that yellow light, I could actually have a yellow light from up top out of camera where you can't even see it, but your brain says, I see this yellow light coming from over here, and even though the actual light might be coming from a second light that you can't see off camera, this is called motivated lighting. We can see it, and it makes sense, and our brain connects these things. We need to do the same thing with music. This song is about monsters and the dark, and it's this Stranger Things inspired track. And so when I say, we're almost out of time,
We're almost out of time.
it makes a lot of sense to have something really kind of creepy or monster effect sounding. So when I put this in, I'll show you how I did it here in a second, but listen.
Tick tock, we're almost out of time.
That actually makes sense because the context of the track makes sense. This is a really heavy hitting track. So the way that we're doing this is I did actually copy over the audio directly down into here. You can see I pan one all the way to the left, one all the way to the right, and then I use a Little Altar Boy to drop the pitch by an octave and then drop the Formant all the way down. So this now sounds like this.
We're almost out of time.
I'm also setting the drive pretty high. If we don't have drive on at all, this is distortion.
We're almost out of time.
It just doesn't sound nearly as cool.
We're almost out of time.
That's what I'm talking about. And the one all the way to the right sounds like this.
We're almost out of time.
Now, the way I did this differently is changing the format. So the format essentially is changing the timbre of whatever the sound is. So if I sing the vowel shape, ah, I could sing that in a ton of different timbres while still retaining the same vowel shape. Oh, like that's all the same note, it's all the same pitch, it's all the same vowel, but I'm changing the timbre, like the color of the sound. That's basically what formants do. Formants will change the throatiness or the nasaliness of that sound. So if I push the formant all the way up, it'll be the opposite. Technically, that is the same pitch, but the timbre is completely different versus down.
We're almost out of time.
Or if I don't change the formant at all,
We're almost out of time.
so you can get all these different kind of sounds depending on what vibe you're going for. But this is actually one of the ways that we can double the vocal. If you say, for example, you have a vocalist come over, you don't record doubles, and you realize later on, man, I wish we would have actually done doubles. Then what you can do is duplicate the vocal performance down and then adjust the formants, and this is gonna change the vocal enough that you're not gonna have phasing or weird artifacting problems. The problem is that you're changing the timbre of the sound. So in many ways, it doesn't work depending on what the song is doing. But you put this all together, sounds really nifty.
Shivers down my spine, tick-tock, we're almost out of time.
Really adds a nice flavor to it. Add it to your toolkit. That brings us to technique number 5, and this is one that I actually learned from a producer friend of mine that completely changed my life, to be completely honest with you, and it is so simple, but yet ridiculously effective. What ends up happening a lot of times whenever we're using reverb is consonances in particular poke through the reverbs, especially if you're using a bright reverb. So if you have room reverbs, or if you're using, bright plate reverb, shimmery reverbs, sometimes you get these like crystalline sounding reverbs, like actually using like Crystalline by Baby Audio, or using Round by Native Instruments. These are very shimmery, bright reverbs. And if you have a vocal running through it and you have harsh S's or consonances, T sounds and S sounds and things like that, CH sounds, those are going to just poke through the reverb and be very, very noticeable, especially when you're listening on small devices like an iPhone or a phone speaker. When you're listening in a nice treated room, you might not actually hear it as much until you put it on a small speaker. And so what I do whenever I am working with reverbs, I always send my reverbs to a bus like this. You can see I've got this right here is using my room reverb right here. So if I solo out this reverb, this vocal here,
I don't know if I'll survive this. If I live to tell,
I'm just gonna turn all these buses off except for the room and listen to what this sounds like.
I don't know if I'll survive this.
So this on this just pops right out of this reverb. So what a lot of people might do is they will say something like, let's just go in here and let's just roll off all the top end. Now let's just take a listen to this.
I don't know if I'll survive this.
You know what the problem is though? We just completely changed the entire character of that reverb.
I don't know if I'll survive this.
I want that brightness in the reverb. The problem is I don't want the consonances in the reverb. So we kind of find ourselves in a little bit of a pickle here. And the way that we're able to fix this is by putting a de-esser in front of the reverb. Okay. Now I'm already de-essing this vocal, but when you de-ess a vocal, you do not want to actually chop out the consonances. So even though we're sending this into the reverb and you're saying, well, you've already de-essed it going into the reverb. Well, the problem here is that you haven't de-essed it enough. So for example, even though I'm already de-essing it, if we don't have this de-esser on, we can still hear the consonances popping through the reverb.
I don't know if I'll survive this.
Pretty bad, actually. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab the de-esser. This is my favorite. This is the Black Salt Audio de-esser. You can just use one stock in your DAW as well. But you can see here, I am literally chopping virtually all of the consonances out. I'm like gonna go all the way over here and then set the threshold to very, very sensitive. So it is going to basically pick out anything that even resembles a consonant, and it's gonna just chop it out. Let's just take a listen now with this on.
I don't know if I'll survive this.
That is magic right there. Like, that is absolute sorcery. Thank you, John McLucas, for teaching this to me years ago. Like, seriously, oh my gosh, I use it all the time. Now, if you're looking for a YouTube channel where they show the entire process of making songs completely from start all the way to final mix, good news. I've literally done this. So you can check out a full start to finish production right here all the way through. See you in that video.